Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning into this update. I'm Joshua Dobi. I appreciate so much your willingness to take a few minutes to sit with me here as we touch on some of the happenings over the last week or 10 days since our last update and video report to you. So to be respectful of your time, I'm going to dive right in to some of the pertinent things that we're watching here and hopefully which are helpful to you. As we talked about during the last update, that was really at the front end of things as they were matriculating with regards to our banking industry, and specifically having a couple of our banks being taken over by the FDIC and one that shuttered its doors altogether. So SVB, or Silicon Valley Bank, has gone through that process, or I really should say they're going through that process right now, but that has already moved into the possession and receivership of the FDIC. All depositors are being made whole. I know that's not getting broadcast a lot on our news right now, but that, as we thought may be the case, has indeed come to fruition as declared by the FDIC. So very, very important when we're looking at issues with regards to our banking system to understand that not only up to the insured amount, but even above the insured amount, because there were sufficient assets on the books at SVB before the FDIC took over to be able to make sure that everybody was made whole. So those things are in good shape there. But we've received subsequent questions for very understandable reasons from many of you. Well, does that mean that there are other banks which are having issues right now? I'm going to give you an answer which you may not like up front, but I think you'll understand why I'm saying it. And that is that there are always banks that are having issues all the time. And we've done things through the years to mitigate some of that, especially with our largest banks coming out of the 2008-2009 economic crisis. We've done some things in order to mitigate banks that are having issues, especially, again, our largest ones. But with smaller banks and community banks, I'm not saying at all that they're all bad at all by any reason, because almost all of them are doing very, very well. But there are some, just like any collection of anything, that are going to be outliers, or they're going to be not performing as others should. And certainly that's what we saw with regards to SVB. That's what we saw with regards to Signature Bank in New York as well. Silvergate, because of their focus on the cryptocurrency industry, definitely in that space as well. So there are always those kinds of things happening. I say that not to shake your confidence in the banking system, but to recognize that these kinds of things, in terms of banks having issues, actually is happening with some regularity. It just happened to be that because of the size of SVB, or Silicon Valley Bank, that it certainly made our radar screen, and because of the folks with whom they did business. We're talking about private equity firms, startup companies which are doing very, very well, a lot of entities which are moving a significant amount of funds in and out of SVB with some regularity. So that's really why it made our radar screen. So very appropriate questions to ask, very appropriate questions to want to get answered in this kind of environment, but please be assured, not only from before this time, but now during this time, that our banking system is sound. Not that there aren't issues with certain players that are out there, but there are always going to be those kinds of things, and it's most important for us to understand the industry and the sector as a whole, as opposed to extrapolating beyond what may be true for just a couple of the players in the mix. And so that's what we're seeing there. Now, along those same lines, this past weekend, as of the time of this recording, we had another pretty seismic movement, and you may have seen it come across your headlines or on their business news channels here over this past weekend, or certainly on Monday morning when it was real. And that is where UBS, so UBS, the French investment company that bought, really through a brokered deal with the Swiss government, bought Credit Suisse. Now, those two entities may not be on your radar screen. They're both based in Switzerland, but for those of us who are in the investment and financial universe, that was a very big deal. Not because it was unexpected, though, and that's something very important to keep in mind. Again, if you're in our end of the world and you're watching these things pretty relentlessly day in and day out, you know that Credit Suisse was really in a pretty tough place for a number of years. Actually, about 4 years. They really hadn't been doing very well. You can even see that with regards to their stock price performance over that time as well. Those of us who were watching those kinds of things already knew that Credit Suisse wasn't in a particularly good place. However, things began to get exacerbated as there was some ripple through the banking system with regards to what happened with SVB and Signature and Silvergate and what that meant for other banks. And Credit Suisse again was this close to being in a very challenging place and really got to a space then where they needed to have some help. So they went to the Swiss government. The Swiss government then brokered a deal between UBS and Credit Suisse, UBS going to take over formally for Credit Suisse. Now, what that means is, unfortunately, if you own Credit Suisse stock, you own even Credit Suisse bonds, you may lose a significant amount, if not all, of your principal. Not good, but again, not surprising. It wasn't the kind of thing where, this hadn't been in the tea leaves, if you will, and was really had some concern already in the system. This just happened to push it over the edge. And so that's what we saw here this past weekend. So again, a pretty sizable sort of event in terms of the names involved, but not very surprising to all of us who are watching these kinds of things, again, pretty much every day in and day out. So those two things big on the radar screen. The third big thing that happened this week, not unexpected, but a little bit of speculation going in both directions, had to do with the Federal Reserve, again, raising the overnight lending rate or raising interest rates by another quarter of a basis point. There was some speculation based upon what's been happening in our banking system that the Federal Reserve would pause or begin their pause a little bit earlier than what they had anticipated. They decided not to do that. They still raised rates again by a quarter of a percentage point, but they did note that with some of the banging around in our banking system right now, that they may be not as quick to raise rates in future meetings, or that they may not raise them as much, perhaps, as they had anticipated. Now, that being said, and you've heard from me several times now with regards to this, we anticipate that there's going to be at least one more, perhaps two more interest rate hikes here in the second quarter. That's new as of the last several months, but we anticipate that that's probably going to be the case. So we want folks to keep that on the radar screen and want you to be aware that that probably is still going to happen. We're probably still going to have at least one, if not two, additional rate hikes. And that's going to continue to impact the system. So when we're looking at the equity markets, when we're looking at the bond markets, I know you've heard me say this a lot here over the last several updates, it's going to continue to run in a washing machine. Until we get to the end of this raising cycle, the market is really challenged to find a significant point of foundation to push forward in terms of future growth. Because it just doesn't know. Because interest rates are such a central point of pricing and of understanding what's moving in the markets, when they're moving at the speeds at which they're moving right now, and they are moving, in my world, very, very quickly here over the course of the last year, it's really hard for the market then to quantify what that means in their pricing models. So I expect we're going to continue to see some big ups, some big downs, but not really going anywhere in particular besides, again, around in a circle, a little bit like a washing machine move. So I anticipate that's going to be the case here for the next several months. I hope I'm terribly wrong and that things just go parabolic again. No, I don't really. Well, maybe I wish that a little bit. But I don't expect that that's going to be happening here. I expect it's going to be a slow slog here for the next number of months. But certainly we're going to be in front of you during that time, offering our thoughts, providing anything in terms of update, and certainly in terms of development if things would transpire in a different kind of direction, so that you may have the best information in front of you. Well, friends, to be respectful of your time, I'm going to draw my comments to a close here. As you know by this time, a very familiar refrain from me. Always, always, always feel free to reach out to us here. We always enjoy hearing from you. We're starting to get into the warm weather now in some parts of the country. Great stuff. We always enjoy that kind of thing. Baseball spring training in effect. We're going to get the NFL draft here in a couple of days. And in my world, that means spring is not too far around the corner. You may have kids who are getting into softball and t-ball and baseball and soccer and all of those good kinds of things now. It is that season. So we're certainly looking forward to the warmer days and certainly the brighter nights with regards to how long daylight lasts. Well, friends, as always, it is a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for your time here. And until the next time, I'll look forward to chatting with you soon.